Welcome to the UFC 194 Vivisection. I'm here with my co-host Connor Rubish. All that are watching today, what few of you there are, we're on the B channel because there's a cluster cuss on the A channel. Shit's gone haywire. We are falling apart all over the place. But for those of you who tuned in yesterday or who will watch this video later today, you may notice that we are once again without our esteemed third man, Dallas Winston. He is a part of the cluster cuss of technology that is rolling over us and has had to bow out because of it. We are sorry to miss him for what is, quite frankly, as good a card as the UFC can stand to put together.
Yeah, no disagreement there.
Thoughts on the card, Connor? That was sort of your cue.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a lot of thoughts. Most of them positive. There are basically no fights in this entire card that I don't like. That's kind of a negative way to say it. In fact, I like all the fights in this card. Some of them are fantastic. You pointed out before we began recording, saying that this may very well be the first main card in UFC history where every single fighter on the main card has headlined a main event at some point or another. And that's true. And I think that's a really good shorthand way of pointing to the quality of the matchmaking here, that we've just got elite fighters all over the place. I think the only fight on the main card that feels easy to predict is Holloway Stevens. And, a lot of people thought that Dennis Bermudez versus Jeremy Stevens was an easy fight to pick as well. So I think, Jeremy Stevens has earned the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy Stevens, he's one of those fighters, and this has personal crazy conspiracy theory time. He's one of those guys that
Jeremy Stevens is a reptilian.
That's right. He's a lizard man, Jeremy the Lizard Man Stevens. But he's one of those guys that fighters who start as a teenager, I tend to think that they just tend to be really inconsistent throughout their career. They don't, for whatever reason, they just tend to have a lot more highs and lows, peaks and valleys.
Sure.
I think Melvin Gillard, would be like a classic example.
Sure.
And Stevens is very much in that mold too, where it's just like on his best nights, when everything is clicking, he is put on some amazing performances. Then other nights, like that fight against Charles Oliveira, he just kind of got run out of the building.
Yeah, really off his game.
And it's really hard to predict which guy is going to show up. But when the best version of him shows up, he can compete with just about anybody.
That's true. Yes.
So, yeah, I think, even in a fight like that where maybe we both feel like we have a pretty good handle on it, it's tough.
It's tough. And that's, I think, the best part about this card is all of the big matchups, hard to predict. So many questions to be answered, and that's what really makes cards like this enticing. I know you guys at home probably don't want to hear that coming from two people who call themselves analysts, but these are hard fights to call, and that's a big part of what makes them so exciting to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always happy for those fights where I just kind of I'm happy to be able to take a chance on a fight.
Yeah.
And be like, I really think that this guy could win. It was like yesterday when we were talking about it with the Jim Miller Michael Chiesa fight.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I think Jim Miller can win that fight. I look at that fight and I think that's a matchup that Jim Miller can still win, and I have some faith in that. And if there are a lot of cards and a lot of times where it's just like, no, we know who's winning this. Tetsuya Kawajiri, Jason Knight. Like, I don't have to analyze that fight.
I don't have to. No one can make me. Yeah,
exactly.
But this card's got all fights worthy of analysis, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's just dive right in at that point. Start things off on the Fight Pass card. First matchup, Court McGee, Marcio Alejandro Jr. What are your thoughts on this?
Never thought I would have missed Court McGee, but I miss seeing that big bearded guy running around the cage. Just he's not much of a finisher, but he's just nonstop action every time he fights. He's a lot of fun to watch. Kind of weird too. He's got a weird stiff style. He's just interesting. And I think the big question here in this matchup is how long he's been away from MMA and how will that affect him. because typically I think I would pick him over a guy like Marcio Alexandre without question. I think Alexandre's got some of the pieces that made Lyoto Machida such a good fighter, hence the Lyoto nickname, but he's also missing a lot of the little connective tissue. He doesn't have the defense. He doesn't have the movement. He waits too much. He can't throw combinations. A lot of these things really give him trouble. And against Court McGee, lacking in defense, lacking in volume, even lacking in wrestling somewhat, it's not a good recipe. So the layoff gives me doubts, but I do favor McGee. I think he will probably break Alexander down and get a referee stoppage late in the fight.
Yeah, 2 years is a long time, but McGee, I mean, he hasn't fought that much. 20 fights, 7 years, or like 8 years. He's still at the point where I don't expect him to come back diminished significantly, you know?
Sure.
Um, Obviously, those injuries could, seriously just take an edge off him. You never know with that kind of thing. If they are going to start limiting mobility, if they've made it harder for him to, or if he's just rusty. But Alexandre Jr. is severely lacking in the tools that win UFC fights.
Yeah. You know, it was like that fight with the fight he had with Tim Means. It was close, but it really didn't feel like he deserved to win. That Alexandre deserved to win. Like it really didn't feel like he'd done enough, even when he had big moments. It never felt like he knew what he needed to do next. The thought process just wasn't there, or the schooling just wasn't there. And I think that's a really
Yeah,
big
I mean,
problem.
I almost take that. I almost take that as more of sort of an indictment of Tim Means and Tim
Sure.
Means' total willingness to fight down to the level of his opponent at
Yeah.
times,
Yeah. To match a slow pace.
and also fight. Yeah,
And I don't think Court
sorry.
McGee is willing to do that.
No, Court McGee does not. Court McGee is very much the I'm going in, I'm going to throw as many strikes at you as I can, and I will put you in the clinch, put you against the fence, work you over round after round. And you have to be the better athlete. You have to be the better technician. You have to have better footwork than me, or you're not going to win.
I guess for an easy MMA math example, we can ask, is Marcio Alexandre better than Robert Whitaker as a counterpuncher, as a defensive fighter, as a mover? No.
No,
Robert
no.
Whitaker, he maybe should have won against Court McGee, but McGee took it to him for 3 rounds straight and did enough to earn the decision. So,
Yeah. Alexandre Jr. has the stripped down version of Machida's game, which is to say that he knows how to throw the counter left. I think he's out of the orthodox, so it's the counter right from him. He knows how to throw the counter right when somebody's coming in, but everything else is just kind of sparse.
Yep.
Odds, they reflect probably that Court McGee's been gone for a couple years, frankly. McGee is the favorite still, minus 170 up to minus 195. Alexandre Jr. is the underdog, plus 158 down to plus 135. Those would be close to me, but McGee's been gone for a while.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough given the circumstances.
That brings us to the second fight lightweight bout: John McDessie, Yancy Medeiros. This is a good fight. To me, this is very much a moment of truth for Yancy Medeiros, who I am still somewhat underwhelmed by. I feel like I started out feeling really hyped on him coming out of Strikeforce, and was like, oh, this is a big guy, really big for the weight class. Has some good physical tools, has some decent things he can do. And then ever since that Eve Edward fight, I've been getting less and less interested in him, even as he's won some bouts. Just because he seems to have I kind of wonder Why did you skip a division? Did you really think was skipping a division really the right move? Like I've seen a
Mhm.
lot of guys do this where he was a middleweight and then he just cut down to lightweight. It's like, should you really have skipped welterweight? Maybe 170 pounds would be a lot better for you with the frame he has.
Sure.
And um otherwise, he's tough and he's big and he's aggressive, but all of his technical skills just seem to be really hit and miss. Like he can do some cool things every now and then, like hitting a reverse bulldog choke on Damon Jackson, um, or landing a big uppercut on Yves Edwards.
Spinning back
But
kick
if
on
he
Joe
doesn't,
Proctor.
yeah, spinning back kick on Joe Proctor. But a lot of that seems based really heavily on his ability to really impose himself physically on
Mhm.
opponents, and technically as well. I mean, Damon Jackson's not a bad grappler, but he's not otherwise a stellar kickboxer or anything like that.
Mhm.
Joe Proctor is kind of in the same boat as Medeiros, just kind of a middling fighter everywhere. And so I really feel like if he can't impose you know, clear advantages on fighters, he's not the kind of guy that's just gonna like outpoint them.
Yeah.
And McDessie is small, but he is very clearly a more skilled kickboxer than Yancy Medeiros.
Yes.
Just he does well to have won him some big fights. He's not gonna beat Donald Cerrone. I guess it's weird because Yancy Medeiros can kind of mirror Alan Patrick in a lot of ways, which is a fight that McDessie lost and a surprising fight that he lost. So there is a precedent for McDessie to lose this kind of bout, but I don't know that I have enough faith in Medeiros to pick him right now. So I'm going with John McDessie.
If Medeiros has one really strong advantage here, I think it's. I can hear myself coming through your headphones right now for some reason.
Oh, I'll mute myself.
Sorry. All right. If Medeiros has one really strong advantage, I think it's his ability to land good hard kicks from both stances. He's a pretty solid kicker. He's powerful in general with all of his strikes. He strikes with conviction, um, and his combination punching is enough to make him a threat in the pocket. Though I think he will really find himself at a loss if he tries to box from the outside against McDessie, because Medeiros has really struggled to cut off the cage in the past. He trains with the Diaz brothers, and like the Diaz brothers, he doesn't seem to understand diagonal movement. He just chases constantly. And against McDessie, that is like a nail in the coffin, because McDessie has some of the best footwork in this division. He takes great angles. He lands strikes off of those angles. He hides his movements with his jab and with feints. And he's just a really strong boxer in that respect. So if Medeiros can beat him up with kicks, we know that McDessie takes kicks. Like a lot of TriStar fighters, doesn't seem to care about checking kicks. He can be kicked to the body if Medeiros from Medeiros' southpaw stance. He'll be open to that kind of stuff. But I don't think Medeiros is consistent enough at that kind of thing. And I think McDessie is one of the few guys who, in that position, can actually adapt and either start catching those kicks or pivot away from them and land strikes while Medeiros is recovering. So I just think McDessie has a strong technical advantage in this matchup. It wouldn't shock me utterly if Medeiros landed a big shot and knocked him out, or even won like a competitive decision. But I just think McDessie is a stronger pick.
Yeah, the one question I do have that I just was reminded of about that from that Patrick fight is I do wonder how like Medeiros, how much of a jab does he have?
It's not bad. It's not bad. His combination punching is actually relatively strong in all regards.
Yeah, 'cause that was the thing with the Patrick fight was that McDessie just, if somebody was really like keeping him on the end of punches, didn't seem to have any way to get inside. and with dealing with a severe reach disadvantage,
Mm-hmm.
and that if front just offense in McDessie's face, that really threw him off against the Patrick in that Patrick fight. Cause that's like the thing I just keep coming back to and remembering is just how little options he seemed to have, how quickly his offense shut down in that fight.
Yeah, yeah, and even when he was like on form, he took a lot of shots against Shane Campbell. A lot of
Yeah,
kicks, a lot of not too many punches. His punch defense has always been pretty solid, but the
yeah,
kicks, which is kind of shocking for a guy from a Taekwondo background. But it's like he's retooled his game so heavily in the direction of boxing that he's kind of lost that kicker's instinct a bit.
yeah. And that's not to second guess myself heavily. I still think that, like, I've said, I mean, Medeiros seems like the kind of guy who doesn't win decisions. Kind of. I mean, that's kind of the thing.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't even go to decisions, frankly. Um, he's either going to get finished or he's going to finish you. And McDessie, I don't see McDessie being on the wrong end of a TKO here or a
Yeah,
submission.
it seems unlikely.
It does. So I'm taking McDessie tentatively, but that Patrick fight does give me pause because Patrick is another big, rangy dude who reminds me a lot of Yancy Medeiros, frankly.
Sure.
So odds on this are John McDessie is the favorite, minus 155 down to minus or up to minus 190. Yancy Medeiros plus 150 down to plus 125. I actually think that's pretty reasonable, all things considered. Like I say, I mean, both these guys have just shown a few too many problems in their game for me to just be like, oh yeah, I'm so locked in on picking
Definitely.
it. And McDessie too has talked recently about retiring, and so that always gives you a little pause about where's his head at. How hard is he working for these fights?
Where you don't ever really doubt Medeiros' desire to fight.
Yeah, you can assume that this is he's probably like living off canned food, waiting between fights, trying to like. He seems like the kind of dude who has everything invested in his MMA career. Whereas McDessie, I think, has his own gym that he runs. So, on that note, Joe Proctor, Magomed Mustafayev, lightweight bout. I'm super excited for this fight.
Yeah, and I think my initial reaction right when I read these names, and reminded myself who Joe Proctor was, I thought, okay, my initial thought is Mustafayev is going to crush him. And then the more I thought about the matchup, I kind of wondered if that was really the case, because Joe Proctor is a fighter who's very easy to underestimate. Watching him, everything is just kind of stiff. He has Joe Lozon inspired boxing because he is a Joe Lozon student, which means that it's there and he packs a decent punch, but it's really kind of mechanical. And his submission grappling is fantastic, but it often puts him in positions where he can be controlled and or beaten up by a bigger, stronger opponent, which Mustafayev absolutely is. But Proctor's tough and he's crafty. I think he's steadily improving. And he can go for rounds, and Mustafayev may not be able to. In fact, I think he's only gone. Has he ever seen a third round?
No, he has not.
So first and second rounds in all fights, most of those early finishes in the second round. The Piotr Hallman fight was a finish late in the third round, and by that point, Mustafayev really seemed to be fading, and it looked like Hallman was maybe on the edge of taking over. And Hallman didn't have too much trouble landing shots up to that point either. It was a fairly competitive fight that Mustafayev seemed to edge just by athleticism and power. So, Joe Proctor is not fragile. And if Mustafayev can't put him away early, then I think Proctor's chances of snatching a late submission really start to skyrocket. And that's the kind of stuff he's good at. Like Joe Lozon, he has that finisher's instinct. I just think that he's going to be there to be hit by Mustafayev early. I think the likeliest scenario is that he gets hurt and knocked out in the first round. But if he doesn't, then I say Joe Proctor's a live dog.
Yeah, this is. There are a couple of things going in a little bit more in Mustafayev's favor this time around. Is for his debut, he was supposed to be training at an ATT, but that didn't happen. I'm not sure why. It just didn't. Now I think I'm seeing that he's with Jackson Wink,
With all the
which,
other Russians. In fact, he is, because Pat Wyman was at that gym not long ago. He said he saw him training.
yeah, and that, I actually think, thinking about his style, that's a pretty good fit for him because he's reasonably focused on like the big singular flashy strikes that they're gonna build in and like work with in his game. And the big thing for him is just kind of getting him like more even keeled on a better pace, taking his time and being patient.
Yeah. He maybe
And
seems a bit tense when he fights.
yeah, and Jackson Wink is great for that.
Yeah.
Like that is a great, that's something that they do really well, is getting their guys to really keep their pace and fight smart, fight in a way that takes advantage of their skills or, of the things that they tend to do well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that could be good for Mustafayev. I don't know how far along he's gonna be this early in his career or in his time with them, if that's gonna be a major change or not. But it is something that I look for to hopefully see his cardio improve. Is that he's gonna try, work with a camp that's gonna pace him a little better. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, it's a little hard in a fight with somebody like Joe Proctor to pick against somebody who has as much pure athletic potential as Mustafayev. He's just one of those fighters that every time you watch him, he's gonna do something that's just like slightly stupidly amazing. Like just kind of like, how the hell did you just do that?
Yeah.
Like I think in the Hallman fight, there was a moment where like Hallman had either had mount or half guard or something like that, and Mustafayev just stood up. Just like,
yeah. It's like he's the kind of guy who can get stuck in mount and bench press you off of him if he really needs to.
yeah, like he just has ridiculous athletic tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that does also mean, if he uses them poorly, he's going to gas. And I think this is a dangerous fight for Mustafayev. Proctor, as we said, he does have that finisher's instinct. He does have the ability. He doesn't have like one punch knockout power, but he does have the ability to string together his aggression and to continue to put together enough offense to knock you out, to hurt you, and then put you away. And the ability to jump on submissions and things like that. I just think he's going to be too willing to scramble and mix things up early in the fight, and that's going to get him hurt. Mm-hmm. And even if he doesn't get knocked out, it could be one of those things where he's hurt the rest of the fight and trying to catch up from being hurt for the rest of the fight. And Mustafayev is also a great finisher. Like he is also the kind of guy who, the moment that's why he has never been past the second round, is that if he has you hurt, he will finish you. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to take Mustafayev for the early TKO, but it is a question. It's a good step up in that it's almost the exact same kind of fight as the Piotr Hallman fight. So it's a great point for him to use to like, okay, you've got the same kind of opponent in front of you. How do you deal with this the second time? So on that note, odds for this fight, Joe Proctor is the underdog, probably a bit more than I would put him at, plus 250 or plus 240 to plus 314. Magomed Mustafayev, the favorite, minus 320 all the way up to minus 435. I think that's a bit much. You can get Proctor inside the distance is plus 639. So
Yeah,
considering Proctor's ability to finish and Mustafaev's potential to gas, that might be
that's
worth
not a
something.
bad chance bet. Yeah, Proctor is he's the late finishing type, where he'll just
Yep.
snap something out of nowhere. So
Yeah, so that is an interesting set of odds for that fight. I think it makes sense for us to pick Mustafaev to win just because of his athletic ability and because Proctor is not so great in any one spot that you can see like, oh, he's just going to take over the boxing or the wrestling or the grappling. But he'll be there competitive in all of it. All right, and that's the end of the Fight Pass card, which moves us on to Fox Sports 1 prelims and Leonardo Santos versus Kevin Lee. I'll just start off talking about this one. Kevin Lee has continued to improve with the leaps and bounds you hope to see out of somebody as young as he is in his career. It seems like ever since going to Extreme Couture, even though Extreme Couture has lost a lot of their recognition over time as being like a premier elite camp, it seems like they've done a great job stripping out his funky boxing style and getting him into like a real, just kind of nuts and bolts wrestle boxing style that takes great advantage of his athletic gifts.
mm-hmm.
And he's a great grappler. He's a great wrestler. He's become a functional, dependable wrestler, boxer, kickboxer. And it just, with the kind of athlete he is too, like Mustafaev, somebody who has that top 10 athletic ability just to start with, that kind of style, being safe, being consistent, unlike Mustafaev, is really a great help early in your career. Like sometimes when you get to the elite, sometimes you need to have some more of that unpredictability, some more of that sort of interesting advanced pieces built in, some things that are unusual to your game built in. But going up the ranks, I feel like you're a lot less likely to suffer ugly setbacks when you don't have, like, he came in with that sort of weird crab style boxing, and that was like obviously Iaquinto just like took that apart
Yeah.
immediately.
Mm-hmm.
And losing that, a fighter like Leonardo Santos, I don't expect Santos to take him down. And if it's not a grappling battle, I think that Lee can kind of do just what he did to Michel Prazeres and just kind of box him up a bit, just kind of stifle his wild kickboxing offense. Especially because to me, Santos, like I've seen improvements in his striking, but anytime he gets stuck there or things start to get challenging, those improvements just disintegrate, and he just goes back to kind of a wild winging striker.
Yeah.
So
I think of him as a pretty enigmatic fighter, right? Because sometimes he really looks sharp. He
mhm.
really seems to have a good sense of distance. He feints and sets up his strikes. Doesn't ever throw in a lot of volume, but he's pretty accurate, pretty smart. And then other times it's just like 3 minutes of what is he doing? What is he doing now? I have no idea. He's not trying anything.
Yeah, he's not trying anything, or he will just like come in with the same wild winging overhand to like single leg attack 3 times in a row, and you're just like, what? Really?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen you do better than this. Like, I know that you have the ability to throw a kickboxing combination and then get a body lock for a trip takedown. We've seen these parts of your game, but it just feels like when he gets a bit stuck, like when that isn't easily there, thinking especially of like the Norman Park fight, like he just kind of starts to slowly degrade in his offense.
Yeah. And he didn't even
So,
look bad. Like he was really
no,
competitive in that fight, but just didn't
yep,
do much to steal it.
yeah. Same thing with the Efren Escudero fight, where that like he won, but it was just like, and Kevin Lee seems like he's Norman Park has improved some things, but we have continued to see him be ridiculously inconsistent as well.
Mm-hmm.
And Efrain Escudero is obviously really inconsistent fighter, and Tony Martin is a very limited fighter. Macario is very inconsistent, and Kevin Lee just doesn't feel like that guy. Kevin Lee is not an inconsistent fighter. He is the picture of consistency.
I agree. He kind of seemed like he was a little too reluctant in his fight with Michel Prazeres. I thought he did just enough to win, even though I think it was a unanimous decision. It really felt like he did just enough to squeak by in each round. He was kind of doing a lot of boxing from long range. He was defending takedowns. Maybe it was because he was put against an opponent who he really felt he couldn't wrestle with. With Santos, I think he probably should at least be comfortable wrestling in the clinch or putting him down and then standing up. He wouldn't want to grapple with him for long on the ground, but it's a fight, and I think that Lee is just by far the more reliable and more well-rounded fighter here.
Yeah, so I would pick a decision. I don't expect Leo Santos to get finished. He's generally too safe, and like if he feels like he doesn't have the advantage, he'll just kind of go into safe mode. So I don't expect it to be a finish, but I do expect Kevin Lee to win. Kevin Lee is a heavy favorite, minus 576 up to minus 750. Leo Santos, the underdog, plus 370 up to plus 530. I think those odds are a little long just because Lee is a willing grappler in the past, has been a willing grappler. And if he tangles up with Santos, Santos definitely has a path to victory there.
Yeah,
but
it's a little wide, but you know, it is what it is.
I'm not about to then turn around and pick Kevin Lee to lose. So, you know. Next up, another fantastic fight on the undercard. Warley Alves, Colby Covington. I'd love to see this fight 2 years from now, but I'll take it right now too. Thoughts?
Man, Warley Alves. I thought he lost his fight with Alan Jouban, but it was close. The problem in that fight for Alves is that he just went bananas. Like, he went insane trying to get Jouban out of there in the first. He spent the first 2 minutes operating at like a sprint level of activity, just punching, going, taking down, throwing kicks, everything, full power, everything. And I think that could still be a problem for him in the future. If he does that, if he hasn't learned a lesson from that, that could be a really big problem against Colby Covington. Covington he's definitely got the stamina. Pretty sure he was an All-American wrestler in college, and he fights like a guy who knows exactly like that's what he needs to do. You know, he pursues takedowns relentlessly. When he fought Mike Pyle, he just stayed on him over and over and over. The fight before that, it seemed like he was kind of working on his striking, just trying to test it out against an easier opponent. I'd be surprised if he did that against Alves. So Alves will have to be watching out for takedown threats constantly. I do think that because Alves is young, I think he's only, 24?
He looks like he's 45, but yes, he's only 24.
He's apparently 24. He's apparently 45, but they tell me he's 24. And you know, he's got time to develop. He's got time to learn. I think that fight against Alan Jouban, despite winning it, should have been a lesson for him and his team. So I expect him to come in here a little more collected, a little more calm, and knowing that he can't afford to go 3 rounds with Covington if he's exhausted after the first. So I think that he might get like a second round submission. I think Covington's going to be there to be snatched up in a guillotine or have his back taken off of one of those takedown attempts. And I know he's going to be going for him. And if he doesn't, then Alves has the better timing, better understanding of distance. He's just a more natural striker than Covington, who's a little rote in what he does. So I think Alves should win. If he fights like he did against Jouban, he'll probably lose a decision.
Yeah, I mean, the fight he had against Nordine Taleb was a much better fight.
It showed that it seemed like he had learned his lesson.
Yeah. I think the big question here really for me is, can Covington get him down and keep him down? Because if he can, I think he can wear Alves down, make him try to use some of the more of that like fast twitch muscle early, and then as the fight goes on, it'll just be exhausting. Because Alves, I don't know, like not just because he looks like he's the same age, but I kind of compare him to, I kind of think of him in some ways like Yoel Romero. And like, I know he doesn't have the wrestling pedigree of Yoel Romero, obviously, but I feel like he has that same like really intrinsic understanding of how fighting works
Yeah.
and the ability to just also kind of shut off and not fight smart. It's like he gets how it works, but will also be ridiculously passive in ways that are maddening.
Well, maybe it's not like his understanding is not a conscious kind of thing, you know. I don't think
Yeah,
it is for Romero either. I think he just goes by feel. He's just such a natural
yeah,
athlete that everything comes to him as if through inspiration. And so then you give him a scenario in which he has to think to get past an opponent, and he sometimes has a 15-minute long brain fart.
yeah. And it's just one of those things where that raises some interesting questions with Alves, because it does mean like a fighter like Covington who's going to be this like aggressive takedown, 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 takedown. If Alves just kind of shows up and is like lackadaisical and it's like, okay, I can handle this, whatever, then that's exactly the kind of fight he could lose. But he has so much, like, it does. I have the feeling that Covington is going to shoot in on him, and we're going to see Alves do something ridiculously athletic, and we're just going to see like a lot of the heart go out of Covington's game over the course of a round. And then after that first round, we'll start to see Alves take over because of that. Um, that may not be it, because Covington, it's not like Covington's not an amazing athlete too.
Yeah.
So the big thing is that both, and I said this on the prospectus last night when I talked it over with Tom, both these guys are going to be like top 5 title contenders at some point in the future. Like, this fight is not going to determine that.
Yeah, I think so. It's a crossroads fight for prospects. It's not even a crossroads fight. It's an
No.
early meeting between prospects. It's like when
Yep.
you look back on like Jorge Masvidal's record, and you're like, oh, he lost to Rafael Sunsao or whatever, like 20
Yeah.
years ago. You're like, that happened. It doesn't
Yep.
really mean anything now.
Yeah, both guys still went on to become great top 5 level fighters.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, I expect both guys are going to go on to great careers. And it's just, yeah, Covington, his game is so linear right now. It is so much based on, can he get the wrestling top control and keep it and maintain it round after round after round? And Marley Alves, it isn't. Like, the thing I really liked about is like, I feel like he worked really hard to the rest of the fight to like, okay, I'm really tired. I need to pick very select spots to generate as much offense as possible.
Which fight
And
was
then I
this?
need to be the Joban fight
Okay, yeah,
for Warley Alves.
yeah.
Like, once it was like, oh shit, I can't run over this guy in 2 minutes. Then it was like, well, I got to fight really smart with.
He didn't perform badly as a survivalist. You know, he hung in there. He had his moments.
And so I feel like he is going to be able to adapt in the cage to Covington's offense and do the kind of ridiculous athletic things that only somebody like Warley Alves can do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is going to be an early loss for Covington that means nothing in his eventual career. Maybe even a stoppage loss, maybe even a submission or TKO. So yeah, those are my thoughts as well. Warley Alves is the underdog here, plus 100, or no, plus 105 down to minus 110. Colby Covington, the favorite, minus 114 down to minus 125. So very close odds. I think Alves should be favored. That it might be worth a bet there. Alves, let's see, inside the distance is plus 225. that may not even be worth more than just picking Alves at plus 105 to win. But it's definitely a close fight. So next up, Tisha Torres, Jocelyn Jones Liebarger. I got to go Torres all the way. I think I see this fight like Jones Liebarger being really similar to me to Angela Hill, where she's got a pretty good, solid boxing game and some decent clinch offense when she can just hang on to the tie plum. And she's actually got a pretty decent scrambling grappling game as well, but her wrestling really lags. And she's got power, but Torres, what we saw out of Torres in that Hill fight was that, Torres, when faced with a power striker, is more than willing to just out wrestle them and just outwork them on the ground. And I kind of feel like she can just do that to Jones Liebarger, who does not have great defensive wrestling at all for 15 minutes.
I'm not sure I feel the Angela Hill comparison. I think she'll be a tougher fight than Angela Hill was. And I thought that fight would be closer than it was. So who knows? But the thing with Jones Liebarger is that she's a pretty solid combination boxer. Angela Hill is mostly a kind of a one and done. She moves, she picks her spots, maybe 2 punches at a time, elbows in the clinch. Jones Liebarger is more of a mauler. Like, she really does not mind standing in, and I think she moves her head fairly well. She slips her head when she jabs at the very least, which a lot of fighters don't do. She's not super consistent, but she's inexperienced still. She hasn't been fighting that long. And she's a great athlete, so it makes up for a lot of those flaws. The takedown defense is obviously an issue, but I'm not sure that it's that bad. I haven't seen any fights where she just in a while, not any recent ones, where she's just been easily run off her feet. Maybe you can find a recent example for me.
Yeah, I was trying to think. It was the big one I saw was against, I believe it was either, I think it was Maria Rios, actually.
Okay.
It was Maria Rios, who, frankly, watching that, looks like a really great, aggressive, powerful athlete with inconsistent application and just not, and maybe not as great a chin as she is a technical fighter.
Yeah.
But Rios was just able to plant her a few times straight on her back.
Sure. The thing is, Tisha Torres, she goes to a wrestling. She's not an amazing wrestler, but she times her takedowns well. So that could definitely be a problem. I think she's going to be in a lot more trouble if she doesn't get the takedown or in the spaces between takedowns on the feet than she was with Hill. Because with Hill, it was kind of like Hill would stalk forward. She was reluctant, and she could throw one shot. Torres would slip it and get in on her hips. And that's not going to happen with Jones Liebarger. She's going to come in there and she's going to throw volume. She's going to mix in uppercuts. She fights out of the lab. I've got a decent amount of faith in what John Crouch does with his fighters. I think he was kind of one of those coaches who he had recognition because of Benson Henderson a little while ago. And since then, I think he's kind of not redeemed himself, but what he's done with Mike De La Torre, for example. Mike De La Torre is not a phenomenal athlete. He's turned him into a really solid, well-rounded fighter. I think he teaches really good takedown defense and really good clinch fighting. Ben Henderson has that. De La Torre has that. I think at some point we have to expect Jones Liebarger to improve in that regard. And as it is, she's not shy about going on the offensive with her wrestling herself.
Yeah.
So it feels like a fight that Torres should win because it's short notice. Jones Liebarger's been taken down in the past. Reactive takedowns when she plants her feet, which we know she likes to do. But I don't know. Tisha Torres seems to kind of have lost a little bit of that in becoming this fighter who knows how to outpoint opponents. I think she's kind of lost some of the venom that she used to have.
I think one of the things that I'm kind of wondering, what I want to see out of this fight for Torres is a much more complete and dangerous wrestler and grappler, along with her striking. Obviously, I don't expect Torres to be anywhere near a finished product. She has not been fighting long at all.
No, true.
And I just think it's one of those things where, like, she's added a new dimension to her game, and it's probably just not very complete yet. Like, and so I expect it to improve technically. Like, I expect as technical depth comes to her wrestling to see it be a better tool, a more functional tool. Whereas before it just seemed like I can hit the takedown, and now it's all just me playing safety. Like, I don't have a lot of other ideas of what to do after this. This is as far as I've gotten in my training, so I'm gonna just kind of stay here.
Yeah, the thing is, I expect that from both of these women. That's the tough thing, because they're both really athletic. They're both really strong. Yep. And Jones Liebarger's, they're both from good camps. So you have the MMA Lab, and we have American Top Team for Tisha Torres. Both camps that teach good wrestling. I don't know.
Yeah. It's just the offense versus defense thing for me. Like, Jones Liebarger has power under you, picked you up in the air, and then took you down. She's not the kind of person who, like, gets in on. And I don't think she can get Torres down that way. I think Torres is too crafty for that, too hard to outpower that way. She's just kind of a little fire plug.
But I don't think she doesn't have to take her down. She's got to stop her takedown. So I think that's the more important, because, Torres. Go on.
I was gonna say, and I just think that I haven't seen enough consistency in her striking to suggest that she's got a really good takedown defense to go with it. Like, and just like I say, that fight I just talked about, that was this year. And she planted her feet in front of this woman and just got blasted off of them and put on her back, and straight scrambler there. It seems like the big thing I see is that she has a lot of faith in her ability to scramble off of her back.
Mm-hmm.
Takedown. Oh yeah, shit. Where did I cut out?
She has a lot of ability to scramble off her back.
Yeah, and so I don't think she's concerned with stopping the takedown because of that. And I think as she gets into better opponents like Torres, that's just gonna cost her right now. And she may adjust because of it, but I think it'll take a loss to do it.
Maybe, but with John Crouch there, is John Crouch even on short notice going to let her come into this fight expecting not to be taken down? Like, look at when Mike De La Torre came in on short notice to fight. I forgot his name last time I brought this up too. I was going to say Ed Herman because he's got red hair.
Mike De La Torre. Oh, Mark Bocek.
Mark Bocek, and did really, really well on short notice. I think that, I don't know. Whatever. I'm going to pick Jocelyn Jones Liebarger. Why the fuck not?
All right. Go after it, you freak. All right. Yeah, on that note, Jones Liebarger is the underdog, decidedly, plus 220 up to plus 257. Tisha Torres, the favorite, minus 275 to minus 360. If you are as strong a believer in the MMA Lab as Connor is, this might be a place to throw a couple dollars on an underdog bet on Jones Liebarger. Next up, then, headlining the prelim card on Fox Sports 1, Uriah Faber, Frankie Saenz. Connor?
Uriah Faber is slipping.
Yep.
He's not as good as he once was. He really, really struggled to pull the trigger when he fought Frankie Edgar. But I don't think he's fallen quite far enough to lose like Saenz just yet. Which isn't to say that I don't think this fight could be competitive or that Saenz does have a shot at winning, because I think he does. I think Saenz actually might be able to replicate a little bit of what Edgar did. He actually moves fairly well from the outside. He's got a whole different mindset when it comes to striking than Edgar, where he will just wade in with huge knees and overhand rights and right low kicks, things like that. He's kind of like Justin Gaethje in his striking. It's just like plant your feet and just haul off and try to destroy somebody with everything you throw. But he can do that for 3 rounds. He's a solid wrestler, not always flawless defensively, but a solid offensive wrestler. And he takes angles to set these things up. He's got okay footwork. So he could be a tough matchup for Faber. But, most of the things that made Faber great back in the day seem to still be there. The opportunistic finishing instinct, the scrambling ability, these things have been kind of his safety net as the other parts of his game have kind of started to fade, as he's not quite as fast as he was, so he can't get away with just throwing lead, looping right hands and stuff like that anymore. He can't, he's added some things to his striking. He jabbed okay against Edgar, not something he used to do. Maybe he picked up a few things from Ludwig, much as I'm sure he would be loath to admit it. But I still think Faber can. He doesn't have bad stamina. He's strong in the clinch. He can hit reactive takedowns, which Sainz is not that great at stopping. If he can pull the trigger, then he should be able to win.
Yeah, this might be one of those times I think I might just go out on a limb and take the underdog on this one, and the expectation that Faber is just going to continue fading. I like Sainz. I've liked him for a while. I picked him to beat Yuri Alcantara, I think, if I'm remembering correctly.
Good call.
And if I didn't, I should have. If I didn't, I'd like to retroactively say I did for time's sake. But he has a really crafty clinch chain wrestling game.
Mm-hmm.
Like, his chain wrestling is really, really good. That's Sainz' elite offensive skill. And I kind of wonder if he can just outwork Faber there. Like, that, Faber, that is his safety net, but that's also what Sainz is best at. And I kind of wonder if this is going to be one of those times where Faber is just kind of like, he's depending on his ability to still be able to out scramble and out hustle somebody on the inside, against the fence, on the ground. And that's where Sainz is going to be able to actually outwork him. He's just going to play right into the game, the fight Sainz wants. Because Sainz is definitely at his least comfortable when he has to kickbox from range for any prolonged period of time.
Sure, yeah.
And I think Faber, like, on paper, yeah, obviously Faber has been the much better fighter. I expect that the pinnacle of Faber's career will have been much higher than the pinnacle of Sainz's career. But I just kind of have this feeling that, I don't know. I'm willing to take the chance that Faber will be playing right into if not younger, I don't know that actually he's not younger at all, really. He's 35. But a fresher fighter's prime skill set. Yeah, I won't be surprised at all if Faber can land a single strike. But anyway.
Yeah, well, beating Faber at this point does not at all make you the next Uriah Faber. That's he's no longer the same Uriah Faber that it's not like Jose Aldo beating him back in the day, or like Mike Brown beating him. But my first reaction to this fight when it was announced was, "Ooh, Sainz is probably going to win." And I think since then, I guess I've gone revisionist on myself and talked myself down and been like, I looked at Faber's more recent fights. I think he can probably keep Sainz on the outside if he wants to, and I think he could probably take him down if he wants to. I don't know that he's going to willingly clinch, but you never know. Like, has Uriah Faber ever been good at game planning? It's always been a weakness of his. He just kind of does Uriah Faber against anyone, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. So I definitely think Sainz is a really live dog here, but I don't think Sainz is the quality of opponent to beat Faber. Or you could say, I don't think Faber has slipped quite enough to lose to someone like Frankie Sainz.
Yeah, it's tough because Faber does still have the ability to have those elite singular moments. Donald, where that was really just kind of like a holy shit, really? I mean, you just went into a pitched battle with Scott Jorgensen a couple of years, same year.
You can't just expect Faber to start sucking, he'll have a fight where it's like, wow, that should not have been as hard as it was. Or the most recent one being the Frankie Edgar fight where it's like, we thought he would lose, but he lost really badly. He didn't get beaten up, but he just allowed himself to lose, didn't seem to be able to get himself back in. But then he's got one like the Michael McDonald fight where it's like a good young fighter, and he's like, hey, I'm still Uriah Faber. You remember how I used to be really good? Still kind of am.
Yeah, I'm gonna pick against Faber tentatively, just because I'm gonna keep my string of always being the first guy off the wagon. Um, as fighters get older, I'm always gonna be that guy who's be like, "Hey, he's probably gonna lose this one because he's old." So I will willingly throw myself into my own stereotype and say Faber. I just got a feeling this is going to be one of those fights, like the Francisco Rivera fight almost was, where he's losing to a guy that you just know he would have beat at any point during his prime.
Mm-hmm.
So odds on this, Faber is the heavy favorite, 592 to minus 800. Signs is the underdog, plus 390 to plus 559. So if you are like me and a heavy believer that fighters decline and that Faber may have declined to the point that he loses to Frankie Saenz, there's potentially an underdog bet to be made there.
Sure.
That brings us to the main card, which has all the really awesome fights to talk about on it. Not that we haven't enjoyed talking about all the undercard, but first up, Max Holloway, Jeremy Stephens, hot fire. I already talked a little bit about this going in, but I mean, you kind of have to pick Holloway here with the understanding that this could be an upset win for Stephens, but it would be an upset win. Holloway, yeah. Holloway seems to have refined his game and continues to do so. Like, he's still relatively a prospect, not just because he's 24, but because he started fighting in 2010. Like, we should still be seeing another couple years this year and next of Holloway steadily improving his game.
Mm-hmm.
And the improvements he's shown are really clean and technical. I mean, this is somebody who just absolutely took Cub Swanson apart.
Yeah.
Down to the, stripping the screws out of Cub Swanson. Like, it was just ugly. And for a round, Jeremy Stephens, before he broke his hand, was doing similar things to Cub Swanson, was beating him up, doing well, broke his hand, everything kind of went downhill from there. But, I just don't have faith in Stephens' consistency. And over his entire career, he has been ridiculously inconsistent. This is a guy who can absolutely demolish Hani Jason, can beat Dennis Bermudez, and can get run out of the building by Charles Oliveira and Yves Edwards.
Yeah.
Like, he's just kind of all over the place and always has been. And Holloway is so consistent right now. Like, he is absolutely going to show up in shape. He's going to show up to implement his game plan. Dennis Bermudez is not that picture of consistency. Dennis Bermudez is another guy who, on the best nights, will show up and absolutely just MDK a fool. And on his worst nights, will get hit with every single punch that is thrown at him.
Yeah. And he's there to be countered. He tends to. The problem with a guy like Bermudez is he flinches when you throw at him, or he doesn't see the shots coming. He's kind of robotic in his striking, where he's moving his head and stuff, but it's like the way Shogun used to move his head. Like, okay, I'm going to bob back and forth. Okay, now I'm going to start punching, and it's all going to vanish.
The Rashad Evans, the classic Rashad Evans head movement.
Sure, yeah, Rashad Evans has great head movement until you throw punches at him, in which case it just stops happening. It's like a facade kind of for Bermudez, and Max Holloway is such a different fighter. His awareness of what's going on is just superb. He sees almost everything coming his way, so he's very difficult to hurt or even hit in the first place. His combination punching is awesome. He's got a great jab. Good footwork. He switches stance, but he's also got nice traditional pivots and things like that. So he can cut tight angles. He can step in close and clinch fight. He can fight from a long range. I thought he was headed for the best performance of his career in that Charles Oliveira fight before Oliveira was injured by.
Okay, we lost Connor briefly, but yeah, one of the things that hey, he's back already. I was gonna talk and step
Hello.
all over you, but you're back. So
I hop back in right away. Happens at least once per show.
yes,
I thought before Oliveira had whatever weird injury he may or may not have had.
sounds like a stinger.
What's that?
Sounds like a stinger.
What's a stinger? Like a stitch?
It a stinger. Yeah, it's like a common football injury where like you pinch a nerve in your shoulder and your body
Okay,
just
yeah,
kind of goes dead.
sure, yeah, muscle spasm or a nerve pinch or something like what Dong Hyun Kim maybe had against Damian Maya.
Hmm.
But before that, unfortunately, happened, Holloway was looking amazing, incredible, landing left hands to the body, just picking Oliveira apart, and it really looked like Oliveira was going to have no way to deal with that. And as much as I say I can't count Jeremy Stevens out, it really feels like Holloway should be able to do the exact same kind of thing to Stevens. He's consistent, he moves, he throws volume, and he hits with a decent power as well. So I think he'll probably knock Stevens out late in this fight after Stevens absorbs a bunch of damage. Stevens can throw a counter left hook. Swanson had a little success with that, so but he adapts so well after about the first 2 or 3 minutes of every fight. Holloway is very difficult to keep hitting.
Yeah, one of the things that I really love about his game is that since he's not quite the most powerful fighter in the world, he tends to have to stack punches up on you to knock you out, and he tends to
Mhm.
be, he's not like some power monster who's just going to run in there. He's not Yoel Romero where he's just going to like throw
He's
you
a he's a,
around.
he's a crisp, he's a snappy puncher,
Yeah,
but he's not he doesn't have heavy hands.
but because he's not the most powerful, overwhelming athlete in the world, Holloway really seems to have like perfected economy of movement,
Mm-hmm.
and that's so rare in MMA, you know.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it's definitely it's the kind of thing that Jose Aldo has done too over his career, and that a very few other fighters have been able to do to really just make themselves have to move as little as possible in order to outwork their opponent.
And I think it's hard to overlook the natural ability that Max Holloway has, because you remember he should have beaten Dennis Bermudez in their fight. He really should have. He looked great, and he's the only man to have gone the distance with Conor McGregor. And I heard recently that up until the point of the McGregor fight, he had no striking coach. So he completely picked Dennis Bermudez apart on the feet with no striking coach. It was him and Dustin Kimura holding pads for each other. That was their striking training. So just to see what he's been able to do since starting to train Muay Thai and starting to develop aspects of the game, I think the sky is the limit for him. I wouldn't
Yeah,
overlook him in a rematch with McGregor the way that he's been fighting now. I think he could fight a really good fight because he was already competitive the first time.
yeah. I hope we see that fight again. That would be a really fun fight to see in the next couple of
I'd love to
years.
see it. I'd love to see it next, whether or not McGregor beats Aldo. I'd love to see that rematch.
Yeah. So this fight, this I think we're both picking Holloway here. It makes sense. Stevens always has a shot, but Holloway is the favorite, -500 up to -625. Stevens, the underdog, +444 down to +350. I'm not terribly. I don't hate those odds,
Yeah.
frankly. Next up, Damian Maia, Gunnar Nelson.
This feels like Gunnar Nelson should be the favorite. It feels like a fight that he should win because he's a lot younger. He's faster. He's a pretty accurate striker. He's got meaner ground and pound, but I just don't see it happening. I just can't write Damian Maya off. And I think, Maya's we've said this many times. Maya's a very underrated wrestler. He's got really good timing on his takedowns. He finishes his takedowns really well. He's no longer the guy that used to pull guard and look for submissions. Sometimes he'll pull on his back and then immediately sweep you over. He's very crafty at finding a way to wind up on top. And Gunnar Nelson, obviously a BJJ ace, but who has ever competed with Damian Maia in terms of grappling? He has made a very good. I mean, we saw how good Neil Magny's jiu-jitsu was against Kelvin Gastelum. It was stupendous. Neil Magny had no answer for Damian Maia on the ground. He looked like a novice against Damian Maia. Maia sliced through his guard over and over, mounted him, hit him, and choked him out. So I kind of see the same thing happening here. Nelson, he's got the shot for those big punches, but he doesn't have boxing. His punching style is all karate, one and done, big lunging strikes, chin up in the air, which is a problem more against other people than it is against Maia. But the worst thing is that he throws himself off balance. He flings himself into these punches, covering a lot of distance. That makes him dangerous and unpredictable. But if Maia can time that and get him down, and also, K1 Maia, not so bad. K1 Maia was a joke when that was all he knew how to do. But Maia's not actually that bad of a striker. He fought a pretty competitive kickboxing bout with Chris Weidman a few years ago. He hurt Rory McDonald on the feet in their fight. And so, I can't count him out in the striking, and I can't count Nelson in on the ground. So I think I picked Damian Maia by decision.
Yeah, this is one of those things that's like a problem with my whole like first off the bandwagon ethos is guys like Damian Maia. They really fuck with that ideology.
Like, oh, he's fading, he's done. Nope, coming back.
Nope. Yeah. Like I picked Neil Magny to beat him because I felt, and I still could see this being a problem. A problem that if you can make Maia work on the ground, he won't go for submissions.
Yeah.
And if he doesn't go for submissions and the fight keeps going and going and going, then you can make him fade and hurt him.
Sure.
Later in the fight. But especially in a 3-round fight where he's not going to have a ton of time to fade, like that Ryan LaFleur fight where he faded, that was a 5-round bout. And the Neil rounder, I picked Magny to win. I picked him to lose the first 2 rounds and win 3, 4, and 5. Was that the headliner?
Magny.
No.
What, Magny?
Magny Maia. No, it was an undercard prelim.
Yeah.
Okay, I picked him to lose the first round and a half and then come back. Whatever.
I think I probably expected. I think I expected the same thing. If you just look through Maia's record at the grapplers, he has beaten like Jorge Santiago, Rick Story, John Fitch, Ryan LaFleur, Neil Magny. Like these are not a collection of chumps. No. He's a
Dong Young Kim even.
Yeah, he's just a level above everyone else in terms of his jiu-jitsu, and he's got the wrestling to actually make the fight happen where he wants it to. And it's not like Gunnar Nelson's a phenomenal defensive wrestler.
No. I really want to pick Gunnar Nelson to win this. Especially because I do think that, he's no longer like a young prospect. Gunnar Nelson is very much in the prime of his career. We should be seeing the best Gunnar Nelson that we're going to, and I think we're finally starting to see that click with something like his win over Brandon Thatch, where suddenly his striking looks a lot more dangerous than it ever did before.
It kind of looked the same to me though. Like, what did Gunnar Nelson really do that was different from what Gunnar Nelson ever does? It's not like he came into that fight having retooled his approach. He threw the same like leaping right hand that he was throwing over and over against Rick Story, and he just fought it's hard to. Brandon Thatch looks so dangerous.
It could even just be a matter of better timing and better, that kind of thing clicking over time.
Yeah, that's true, and I think he does have really good timing. But also, Brandon Thatch,
Brandon Thatch may have been a false flag. Yeah,
super inexperienced, has a lot of development left to do, and particularly once that fight went to the ground, like Nelson might be able to drop Maia like that, but Maia's not going to sit up and take both hands away from his neck and just allow himself to be rear naked choked. He's not going to make that kind of error.
Yeah, and I have yet to have the faith that Gunnar Nelson has the kind of high output striking to just like really outwork Maia and make the fight dangerous for him there the whole time.
that seems to kind of be like that's like the John Kavanaugh ethos is like, let the fight happen. Like all of the things he was saying to Gunnar Nelson in the Rick Story fight were like, oh, we don't train techniques. We don't train for opponents. We just train
Yeah,
to adapt to the situation. Not a good idea against Damian Maia. You gotta prepare specific things for him. You gotta prepare to
yeah,
tire him out and have a good strategy.
yeah, yeah. And at that point, I want to pick Gunnar Nelson. I'm gonna keep feeling weird about it until the wheels just fall off him or he retires. I don't know which is gonna happen.
Yeah. So you picking
But I
Damian Maia?
gotta be done. I gotta be done picking against Damian Maia for anyone except title challengers.
Yeah.
You know,
That's all he seems
that's
to really
just the
lose
way
to.
it is. Yep. So I'll pick Damian Maia by decision. Boring as hell decision, probably, unfortunately.
Oh, no doubt. And by the way, I do want to say, because I've spoken so much about how insanely supernaturally good Damian Maia's grappling is, all hail Jake Shields,
Oh
because
yeah.
Jake Shields is the only man to ever compete with Damian Maia on the ground and even beat him there.
Yep. Yep. They are birds of a feather when it
Yeah.
comes to grappling.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that, like, if you make it hard on me, I will just lock you down for 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And you have to fight. We don't have to fight. I'll just be done.
It's like Damian Maia has the option to just turn a fight into a jiu-jitsu match.
Yep.
It's like, it's not an MMA fight anymore. Let's grapple.
Yeah.
You just have to do it.
Yep. So odds on this are basically dead even. Gunnar Nelson is the slight underdog, plus 115 to minus 110. Damian Maia, minus 111 down to minus 145. That's reasonable. I'm fine with that. Maia is the kind of guy now where he deserves to be a very slight favorite over everyone in the 10 to 15 range at welterweight.
Yeah.
Constantly so. You know?
What's that? You cut out there for a sec.
Oh, I said not a huge favorite, but a slight favorite consistently.
Yeah, absolutely.
Until somebody can prove that he's just not there anymore. And that when that happens, that'll be an interesting day. Next up, Ronaldo Souza, Yoel Romero. I forgot. Is this me or you?
Maybe I think it's me.
You go.
Okay, I'll take it. I came into this fight. I talked about this with Pat Wyman, and I fully expected to pick Jacare. And damn that Patrick Wyman, but he talked me down and talked me out of it. And I know that this is probably, it's suspect because Pat Wyman is a fan of Yoel Romero. He's like his favorite goddamn fighter in the world.
And I love Pat, but when he gets really excited about people, he makes the argument.
Well, I do that too. I mean, that's how logic works. You don't have to be right to make something sound convincing.
Yeah.
And if you're smart enough, you can convince yourself because that's how logic works.
Yeah.
But still, if I ask myself all the big questions about this fight, I don't really know how Jacare wins. Because, okay, can Jacare, because we know Romero sometimes tires. He's a big muscular guy and he does everything explosively and crazily, but can Jacare push the pace? He's not really very good at that. He tends to stalk and pick his spots and throw maybe 2 or 3 big punches. Can he fight competitively in a pure striking match? Well, he tends to use most of his punches to enter the clinch, which is where he controls opponents. And when he can't, we saw that in our second round against Francis Carmon, who's not an amazing striker. He kind of is able to get outboxed. Can he fight someone who is as big and as strong as him? Well, I think the last time he did that was Luke Rockhold, and no, it didn't really work out that well. Can he... And if he can't fight a striking battle, can he contend with Yoel Romero in the clinch by punching his way in? I don't think so. Yoel Romero is big. He's strong. He's a grappling savant, just like Jacare. I think he's probably the harder hitter, and if not, he's at least the more focused striker because he's got a record full of knockouts, and Souza does not, even though he seems to have pretty heavy hands. So I don't know. What I kind of feel this fight will look like is a really dull, boring fight between two guys who are used to having big moments. You know, Jacare will lock you down and nothing will happen, and then he'll get a big takedown, or he'll get an amazing choke, or land a big strike and drag you to the ground off of that. And Yoel Romero will dance around and make funny faces until he like flying knees your head through the rafters out of nowhere, where he just shows off his athleticism like that. Both guys really strong, both explosive, both great grapplers, both dangerous strikers. But in all of those phases, it just feels like Yoel Romero is a little better. The thing is the mental game here is that Yoel Romero, we know, as we said before, has a tendency to just drift off into space sometimes. And that's not necessarily a good thing against Souza. But I also don't think Souza is that good against fighters who he feels don't respect his physical attributes. I think he really is kind of a bully where he feels like he's in charge against a guy like Gegard Mousasi, who's small and gets out muscled and out techniqued in close. But against big fighters, he doesn't always look that confident, especially not in going for the finish. And again, like, how do you get Yoel Romero down? In fact, I think if anyone did to take down, it'll be Romero. So, yeah,
Yoel Romero's. Yeah, you're picking Romero.
Yeah, his takedown defense. Is that what you were going to talk about?
It's there when he wants it to be there.
I think it's there consistently now. It looked bad early in his career. What I heard from Pat is that he literally, for the start of his MMA career, did not train wrestling. That he was just relying on his muscle memory, and he wasn't training it anymore and was learning to strike. And I know that he now is training with wrestlers again. So
yeah, and I don't doubt that.
Yeah, and it's looked, I mean, against Brad Tavares, against Brunson, against Kennedy, it's looked pretty damn solid since.
Yeah. His wrestling does not seem to be a major problem. It doesn't seem to be, like, his defensive wrestling doesn't seem to be a problem anymore. But there is that memory of, especially like the Hani Marks and Derek Brunson fights.
Sure, yeah.
Where we were just watching him get taken down. I mean, like, you're an Olympic silver medalist. What the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, he wasn't getting held down at the very least. But if someone's going to hold him down, then Jacare is the man to do it.
This is a tough fight because Jacare's approach is pretty damn linear.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, he's going to kind of wind his way in this like little sidewindery snake-like attack where he will throw these 2 or 3 hard punches as he's bobbing his head inward at you. So it's like bam, bam, and then dive in on the takedown as you're covering. And if he doesn't get it, he'll press you against the cage. And if he does get it, then you're fucked. And that's, Yoel Romero, like I'm talking about with Warlley Alves, he's the kind of guy who has this incredible natural feel for how to fight.
Yes.
It's just like watching him in that Lyoto Machida fight, he can just kind of like fuck around with Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, on the feet. Like, he could just play a kickboxing match, let it play out with Machida, and never convincingly lose a round.
Yeah, and it just, because he has this sense of like, well, this is, these are all of the options out in front of me. I can take any of them at any point. If you throw something like this, I can just move like this, and then I'm just going to throw a hook back. And, that's what has all of my combinations and all of my slips and all of that, and know exactly what to do when I see something coming and all that. And he's just like, oh, well, I see there's a kick over here. I'm just going to move this way, and then I'll throw my hand out here because I can see you got an opening there. And very few people can fight like that.
Yeah, it's just natural awareness, natural feel for how the fight works.
Yeah.
And it's not a very systematic approach. That's his problem. It's not like you said, it's like all of his options are just hanging out in the air, and he can pick them down, it's not a flow chart. There's not like an understandable rhythm or path through those options. They're just kind of randomly arrayed for whatever Romero feels like doing at the moment.
Yeah, it was like, and eventually with the Machida fight, it's like, oh wait, you know what? I could just take you down and fucking just destroy you. Let's just do that.
Which
Like,
why didn't
how did
he do
actually?
that? Why didn't he do that in the first round? Like he should have done that way sooner.
Yeah, it just, it's just like certain things just kind of click and get picked out of the ether, and he does them, and all the, Jacare, like you say, it's very tracked in. It's just like, I'm gonna weave in like this. I'm gonna drive you into the cage. I'm gonna take you down. I'm gonna move to your back. I'm gonna move to a dominant position. I'm gonna choke you out. That's the end of the fight. And damn it if that doesn't make this fight hard to pick, because it very much like the Covington Alves fight. It is all about like, does Souza get? And I think you kind of have to give this to Romero, because Souza's striking, like, he is powerful and he's fast and he's good enough at everything. He knocked out Derek Brunson too. Like, and Brunson's a good, big, strong, fast, athletic fighter. Not the striker, but not a great striker, but still, is clean enough. It's not just like wild and sloppy. He does have these very practiced strikes that he throws.
Oh yeah.
But it is expectable. It is something that Romero can be like, okay, I see how you're going to approach, and I'll pick out this X option, Y option, just duck my head off to the side a little, throw an uppercut, dart around, do a barrel roll, and Souza get him down and then keep him down. And I'm going to say, with Romero having actually been working hard on his wrestling, yeah, I'm going to go with you and pick Romero here. And it's weird. It's picking weird, Romero.
Right? Even when you pick it, you're like, beating Jacare. Because Romero is a weird fighter and Jacare is not. But where does he have an advantage, Jacare? Really, like the jiu-jitsu, of course, but
yeah,
that's like a third tier thing. You need to do two other things to get to that. And I don't know if he can beat Jacare or can beat Romero in either of those two phases.
Yeah. So the only thing I will also say is that Romero, and even in the Tim Kennedy fight too, because he's so confident, because he's so like natural and just kind of go with the flow, he does have that small tendency to feel like he's safer than he is when he's striking. And Jacare does have the power and the speed and the ability with his hands down, being like, okay, I'm fine over here, no big deal, and get absolutely clocked by something.
Definitely.
So that is like the big secondary X factor. But I'm going to pick Romero on the consistency. Like, I'm going to pick him under the idea that he absolutely taken down and manhandled, and that this is a 3-round points battle that he is consistently edging. So odds have Romero as the slight underdog, plus 130 down to plus 112. Ronaldo Jacare Souza minus 132 up to minus 165, which I get it. I think Romero might be worth an underdog bet there. And that leads us to the co-main event: Chris Weidman, Luke Rock. Toms on their grappling games. Obviously, these are two fighters I've seen a lot of. And all the arguments being made, I gotta feel like I'm still sticking with Chris Weidman.
Does this not feel kind of like the hardest fight ever to predict, though? I mean, we just went through all of this rigmarole with trying to figure out Souza Romero, but like there are some clear things in that fight. It doesn't feel like there's any even if you just break each phase down into little segments, there's nowhere where both of these fighters can't compete with each other.
The inside is what has me picking Weidman. And because I feel like at the very highest level of the sport, MMA, the current MMA metagame is still like what the biggest advantage you can have at the very peak end is being the better pocket boxer. Because that is still a skill that is so outside the norm in MMA. Like there are very few fighters that do it well. And most of your like that's really a big place that most of our current champs shine. The exceptions obviously getting up into light heavyweight and heavyweight because those are bananas crazy divisions where normal rules do not apply and we should ignore them at all costs. And lightweight is, I think that, that's a division that's just been trading belts every title defense. So I don't know how much you can take away from that at the moment. But your current dominant champs all seem to be great pocket boxers, and Weidman is a pretty good one. He is average, not amazing, but good enough to hang out with Lyoto Machida in the pocket and scare Machida off of some of his pocket striking. And good enough to, to chase Anderson Silva down and stay safe and actually land the strikes to knock Silva out, things like that. He there. And Rockhold, that is still a major weakness for him. He is still not a comfortable pocket striker that I have seen to date.
I think he's gotten better there. I think he looked pretty solid in that range against Machida when Machida was lunging him after him. I agree with you. I don't love Rockhold's boxing. I think he tends to overextend when he punches going forward. He doesn't have a very good jab despite having such great reach. He barely goes to it. But he seems to have pretty solid instincts for taking away and creating distance inside. He will drag that counter right hook in after him when he retreats, and he'll take a little angle. It's sometimes he retreats on straight lines. I think I have to say he's probably better defensively in that range than Weidman, though. He's not as potent offensively because Weidman can really crack. But Weidman's been pretty hittable in most of the past fights. And unlike Machida and unlike Anderson Silva, Rockhold's not going to have any issues clinching with Weidman, I don't think. If he needs to take away space rather than just trying to retreat and get away.
That could very well be. I still think, I think Rockhold is good in singular moments of boxing in the pocket. So right when the moment you close him down, he can fire off a sharp counter hook and then pivot out. Mm-hmm. Or he can, jump, move further in for a body lock and then move for the takedown. He can do those little things, but if he's forced to just set in the pocket, throw 3 or 4 punches in there, I don't trust that.
Yeah, I agree with that because even if Weidman's hittable, he's much more willing to actually maintain the distance and continue striking. So if Weidman manages to get Rockhold's back against the fence frequently early on in this fight, what's Rockhold? He can clinch. That's his option. He can clinch and tie Weidman up better than his past opponents can, and that's one of the big neutralizers. And he can counter him as he's chasing him backward. But once he's in that range and stuck there, Weidman's got the heavier hands. He can take a hell of a punch. He does not back off, and he's got, kind of like McGregor, he's got this insane self-belief that just makes him really hard to outfight.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think for me that a lot of this fight pivots on, because I don't see Rockhold or Weidman ending up with a serious ground advantage. Mm-hmm. I think I probably trust Rockhold to be better in transition, getting submissions.
Yeah, definitely.
He seems to have a much more natural grasp of the scramble. and then lock up a submission. Weidman is good at finding and maintaining a position and then forcing you to kind of exhaust yourself working against it. But I don't think, but he doesn't have that same natural instinct for just finding submissions. And to that effect, he has very few submissions. But I don't see either of them getting the sub. I could see, I think if Rockhold wins, he wins this by submission, basically, because he finds something in one of those transitions. He's able to make Weidman scramble, and then he's able to get a back take and able to make, find a rear naked choke to do something like that. But I feel like Weidman's ability to press him against the cage and to make even we talk about the clinch, Rockhold has the same problem. Weidman is a much better
Yeah, and I
much better there.
Much better there than what? Sorry.
Sorry, what were you
saying?
Sorry, I was gonna say much better.
We're having some lag, so we keep stepping on each other. Sorry.
Much better than Bisping
Yes.
and Machida and Boich and Philippou, all of whom who have their own skills there. Especially Boich and Philippou are very good dirty boxers, but it's a singular skill in their case.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing about middleweight. Still, is it's like a Shark Tank in the top 5. But then we don't really know how those guys match up with each other because they've been fighting guys who are kind of past their prime, or they have one really clear weakness, or they're not great athletes up to that point. They're fighting middleweights that we would have expected to be middleweights during the Anderson Silva era. And so Chris Weidman's and Luke Rockhold's, like even Weidman himself, yeah, he had some underrated wins coming up, but like he didn't. It's not like he beat anybody that was Anderson Silva, before being Anderson Silva. So I keep flip-flopping on this one too in my head, but I just have to stick with my guns the pick that I made on heavy hands and go with Rockhold. I think for me, the big thing here is stamina. I don't think, Weidman, he hits harder, but man, Rockhold can go for 25 minutes straight without slowing down. And if Rockhold is still there in the 3rd round, or in the 4th round, then I think Weidman is going to really be in a tough spot. It's not like he's gonna blow his wad and go crazy like Vitor did. He's not going to be kind of uncomfortable pursuing like Lyoto Machida was. He's going to pressure him and just kick him over and over and press him against the cage and pick him apart. Weidman tired is even more hittable than Weidman with fresh legs, and Rockhold's pretty accurate and he mixes his strikes fairly well for all that he has only a couple techniques that he really likes to use. So that's the main thing in my head is the long game. I think it'll be a really hard fought decision for Rockhold, but it's Chris Weidman and I'd rather Weidman win. I want to say that right here and now. Luke Rockhold seems like a dick. I like Chris Weidman. I want Weidman to win. So I still hope he does. I hope I'm wrong. But, I picked Rockhold already, so I'm going to stick with it.
In terms of class warfare, I think you definitely have to root for Weidman.
Sure.
Just because we know Rockhold's a millionaire.
Yeah.
Like, he's not doing this because he's hungry.
He has sort of a millionaire playboy attitude about him, too. Chris Weidman's like, well, like Chris Weidman's idea of like living the life is having like a normal suburban house. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's Chris Weidman's idea of having made it. Look, like Chris Weidman's life probably looks like shit to Luke Rockhold, and it makes Luke Rockhold really unlikable.
It does. That's true. I'm picking Weidman. I think I think it's going to come down to the ability to strike consistently in the pocket. I think that Weidman's going to be able to push him against the fence, and that when they're there, neither guy is going to find takedowns, and neither guy is going. And scrambles may happen, but in those small instances where they are locked in close combat, Weidman throws more consistently with more variety and has more faith that he can sit down on his punches in those situations.
Yeah, I can see it. I hope you're right.
So odds on this, Weidman is very slightly favored. minus 128 up to minus 150. Rockhold, the underdog, plus 110 up to plus 120. So narrow odds. I, I wouldn't be, if they were reversed, I wouldn't disagree. I'm fine with them where they are.
It's a close
Champs
fight.
almost always favored. So,
Except for the fight we're about to come to, right?
yeah, except for now the main event. Take it away. Conor McGregor versus Jose Aldo.
Oh man, this fight. I don't think it's as I don't think there's as many there's as much technical nuance to this matchup as in Weidman Rockhold, but I
Mm-hmm.
think there's even more mental
Yeah.
craziness going on in this fight because uh, Conor McGregor is a crazy man. He's really his fighting style really points to the fact that he is probably a little unhinged. Um,
Mm-hmm.
he and I'm not saying the fight was because I truly don't think it was, but the way he fought Chris Weidman, it was like a wrestler who
Chad Mendez.
refused. Mendez, sorry, the way he fought Chad Mendez, it was like a wrestler no selling. It was like a shoot where like Chad
Mm-hmm.
Mendez is landing all these big shots. He's taking him down. Conor McGregor gets up and he just wasn't following the script
Yeah.
because what's supposed to happen when you take all those punches and you get taken down every time you throw a committed strike is you're supposed to lose confidence in what you're doing. And it just Conor McGregor, he upped his volume when he managed to get back to his feet. Like he came on twice as hard.
Mm-hmm.
No, absolutely no respect for the fact that he might be taken down. That makes him a risky fighter, right? I think a lot of people read my puncher's path piece, the idea that McGregor is like turning into maybe someone who's more willing to brawl than he should be. I think that's definitely the way he's developing as a fighter,
Mm-hmm.
and that there's a risk in that. That article that I wrote was not like, oh, this is great, he's going to turn into a warrior. It's like, oh, he's going to destroy himself eventually. But
Mm-hmm.
until that happens, it makes him a force of nature to deal with in the cage. It makes him a really terrifying opponent to face, and that's really what makes this so fascinating to me. Because if he didn't have that, I'd really confidently pick Jose Aldo. I
Yeah.
really would, because it's Jose Aldo. Conor McGregor is very, very good. He's great. In fact, Jose Aldo is the GOAT of this division. He's a top 3 pound for pound fighter, one of the very best fighters ever. And so tough to call. And Conor McGregor's got the power, he's got the confidence. I think really though, what most people have overlooked is that I think Jose Aldo is also a little crazy. And I think most people have undersold that because McGregor is so much louder. He's the loudest voice in the room, so you turn your eyes to him. But I keep coming back to the change in Jose Aldo in that last Chad Mendez fight. The switch that flipped,
Mm-hmm.
where almost every single time Chad Mendez had a really good moment, or almost every time that he fouled Jose Aldo or seemed to have something that might give him some momentum, Aldo just turned into an animal and just
Mm-hmm.
came after him. Like Jose Aldo was not the man who was content to coast, because he's only content to coast when he feels like he's winning.
Yeah.
And uh and the moment, he won't coast until he feels like he's ahead. And the reason he's had close-ish fights in the past, like the one with Frankie Edgar, I think is because I think he did get a little tired and whatnot, but I also feel like he didn't think Frankie Edgar was a threat. Like even with
Mm-hmm.
Edgar outpointing him, Edgar wasn't pushing him. He wasn't pressuring. He wasn't making him feel uncomfortable. So Aldo was like, whatever. These last 2 rounds, who cares? Conor McGregor is going to press him constantly. And so Conor McGregor is going to constantly be flipping that switch in Aldo's mind where he says, I need to put it on him. Now, can Aldo do that for 5 rounds? I don't know. That's the big question. If McGregor can constantly give him things to react to and force him to counter and force him to slip and force him to move all the time, he can absolutely tire Jose Aldo out. Then again, can Conor McGregor actually do what he usually does for 5 rounds? He looks like a stamina machine, but he's only gone to the second round in every single one of his UFC fights, most of them in the first round. So, like the Chad Mendez fight, Mendez was gassed, but was Conor McGregor going to do that into the third and fourth round at that pace? It's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine. So I think Jose Aldo just has more technical depth to his game. I think he has more answers, more things to go to. I think really the big deciding factor in this fight is footwork. And while McGregor can cut off the cage and he can press you backwards and attack. I don't think he's very good at doing both at the same time. Every time he tends to take a sidestep and try to cut off your escape, it's like a reset for him, where his attack is let up for that moment. And Aldo knows how to escape and attack simultaneously. You know, he can cut a pivot and not be constantly giving McGregor space to cover, but actually like pivoting, staying close to him and hitting him and then creating distance. And boy, I can't wait to see Conor McGregor try like some kind of capoeira kick and have his plant leg chopped out from under him, because I think another thing that's overlooked, I said this on Heavy Hands, I said this numerous times, but when this fight was announced and everything, everybody's first reaction, everyone who hated Conor McGregor's first reaction was, oh, Jose Aldo's going to destroy his legs. And I was like, no, you know, like he knows how to check and whatnot. Like I convinced myself it wasn't that big of a factor. And then like 2 weeks ago, I started watching footage and I was like, Jose Aldo's going to destroy his legs. Like it suddenly became an option in my head again. I suddenly realized what a big factor it was.
Yeah.
McGregor's going to try to kick Aldo. And I don't know if that's a great idea. And the big thing is that Aldo has almost always had to worry about his opponent trying to take him down. Almost always. And that, I think, like against Edgar and against Mendez, that's always been why he's had to really be cautious about when he kicks. And like McGregor's not going to take him down. And if he does, he's not going to do anything to him on the ground. So Aldo can go in there knowing that he could kick as often as he wants to. And I think that's a big thing. I think if he can kick McGregor with reckless abandon in the first round, I think he can probably really slow him down. So I'm picking Jose Aldo. I can't make myself pick against him. Close fight, but I got to go with Junior.
Couple of things. First, I'm already tense about this fight. Just like talking about it a little bit. Like I'm already just kind of like, you know, just like anticipating it so much. And the second thing being, and this is not to do with any analysis of the fight, but I would argue heavily that if Aldo wins this fight, he has the best record and the best career in the history of the sport.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Because he will have beat not only the old guard that was there before him at 145. He beat Alexandre Franca Nogueira. He beat Cub Swanson. He beat Mike Brown. And Uriah Faber. Those were like the old guard who were there ahead of him at featherweight. He has beat all of the challengers of his era. Mark Hominick, Frankie Edgar, Chan Sung Jung, Ricardo Lamas.
Twice.
Chad Mendez twice. And Chad Mendez, and to the extent of Chad Mendez the second time, and if he beats Conor McGregor, it will be beating the challengers after his era.
Yeah.
The guys who were going to be champion if he didn't hold the belt.
And more than that, like McGregor is the poster boy of the third generation of fighters that Aldo will have faced, which is something that only fighters like George St. Pierre have been able to do, to just weather whole generations of contenders.
And GSP, the only guy he really did that with was Johnny Hendricks. That was GSP's new generation win, and that was a barely did he squeak that out.
Mm-hmm.
But GSP, he beat the generation before him. He beat he beat his generation. And then Johnny Hendricks was the new guy to come up that was really the next generation of fighters. And that's when George St. Pierre retired. You look at Anderson Silva. He beat the generation before him, the Rich Franklins, I can't remember Anderson Silva's early career.
The Chris Liebens.
The Chris Lieben. Yeah, the generation before him was maybe not the best generation. The Nate Marquardt, you could even say. And, some of those guys. Even Lee Murray. Jeremy Horn, Carlos Newton.
Okay, yeah. That
definitely was the generation before him. Then he beat his generation, even Dan Henderson too. They beat his generation, Patrick Cote, Talis Latis, Damian Maia, Chael Sonnen, Vitor Belfort, although Vitor spanning both, Yushin Okami, stuff. And then Chris Weidman's the new generation.
And he couldn't even come close to beating him.
No. And, same thing I would say with Fedor, too. Fedor beat the guys before him, Nogueira, Barnett, those guys beat his generation. And then he started getting into the younger fight, like the new generation of heavyweights. And Fabricio Verdum and Antonio Bigfoot Silva, those kind of guys. And they beat him.
Mm-hmm.
Jose Aldo would be just about the first champion I can think of to have made a significant win over the new generation of challengers if he beats Conor McGregor.
Yeah,
and that would be huge. That's something that people really don't. It's credit more. On to this fight, actually thinking about it and talking about it. Like I say, I'm already tense just thinking about it. And the biggest question I have in my mind is really, it does come down to that question of Jose Aldo flipping the switch and what happens when his opponent doesn't go away when he flips it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing with him, is like, yeah, he's very much, when he starts out the fight at a good clip, solid, landing his big shots, hitting his combos, doing all the right things. And when the moment he realizes that you don't have an answer for any of that, he just coasts. It's just like, okay, I did that for a couple rounds. Now I'm just going to, whatever, you can't compete with me anyway. So why do I even need to be here?
I think some of it too is that Aldo is a better pressure or better counter puncher, a more pure counter puncher than I think most of us have realized for some time. Somebody said in the comments to one of the Heavy Hands episodes that he's accomplished the greatest thing you can do, which is to be a counter fighter while convincing the world that you're not, which is kind of true, because he's like this presence. But I think, he feels like he can coast, but also he really relies on his opponent to give him things to respond to.
It's true. And so, but so he becomes very comfortable then in just this like very relaxed style of like, I don't have to work that hard to beat you. That's fine. He's comfortable there. And at some point, it does become a question of, if he's actually pressed the whole time all the way through a fight, is he actually prepared to respond to that? Because we've even seen like that Mark Hominick fight where Hominick did keep coming after him and didn't have the skill to actually beat him. But he kept coming after him, and he did hurt Aldo. Like, he did actually land shots on Aldo. Like, he actually was able to make some small successes late in that fight. While Jose Aldo was just like, hey, you can't do anything to me anyway, and he still ate a couple shots because of it. And McGregor is absolutely not going to stop because he gets hit hard. Because there was a moment in like the second round of that Chad Mendes fight, and Chad Mendes had enough moments to stoke Jose Aldo here and there throughout it. But there was a serious moment in that fight, and I think it was the second round, where Mendes hit Aldo hard, and Aldo just blasted him with this counter, and you could tell how angry he was about it. It's just hit a huge counter punch that stopped Mendez's offense dead. And everything after that in the fight was just a little more tentative from Mendes. Like, nothing had as much faith in it as it did in the early rounds of that fight for Mendes. He was and for that sake, Jose Aldo was much more, he was much more relaxed. Like, Mendes would come after him, be a little bit tentative, and Aldo would pick him off. And Mendes never really got back into the competitive spirit that the early round of that fight had.
It's crazy, because that's what game planning is in combat sports, is trying to take things away from your opponent. And the only way you could
Yeah.
take it away from them, barring like actually breaking a bone or something like that, is to make them hesitate to do it.
Yeah.
And McGregor doesn't seem to do that. But can McGregor take away what Aldo does? Because, like I said, Aldo
Yeah.
responds to everything.
Yeah.
McGregor doesn't let other people take the initiative. So it's like McGregor refuses to adjust unless he wants to. But Aldo adjusts like nobody else. Like he really adjusts phenomenally well. So it's like the ultimate reactive fighter versus the ultimate initiative taking offensive fighter.
Yeah, and the only question I have though then is if Aldo is constantly reacting and adjusting, is he willing? It's not even is he able, but it's just like, is there a point where he can't anymore because he's so unused to doing it? Because that's just not how he fights.
I would be surprised if that were the case, but it's a good question.
Because I mean, he's gotten so comfortable with this idea of like, if I have to, I can grab onto this well of extra horsepower and make you go away, and then I can go back to the comfortable fight that I like to fight, where I don't have to work that hard to beat you because you've already beaten yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, can he stay in that well and fight from it? And maybe
can McGregor make him? Can McGregor make him? That's the question, right?
I think McGregor absolutely. Well, he can make him as long as he can stay on his feet.
But how well does McGregor's power last into the third round of a fight when he fights at this kind of pace? When he's being countered, when he's being kicked in the legs and the body, how does McGregor cuts a lot of weight? He looked like Skeletor at the weigh-in for the Chad Mendes fight. He looked horrible.
I think I would be surprised if his power doesn't carry. His output may drop. He may become more labored, but I do feel like he's just got the natural mechanics that make his power always there.
Just kind of swings his punches out.
Yeah, and his hands are fucking gigantic. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen them in relation to his body, taking a good look at them, but they are like, it's like those cartoons where like the glove inflates and like they've got these huge monstrous hands all of a sudden. That's McGregor's hands. Like, they are way outsized for his body.
Yeah, he has kind of the like what Fedor Emelianenko used to say about throwing punches. He doesn't want a stiff arm. He doesn't want to push. He wants to throw his punch like his fist is an iron ball on the end of a chain. And that's McGregor. Like, has just big old hands, and he just like, it's like a slingshot when he throws them. So it's very fast, very effortless.
So I do think he has the power if it's a constant stand-up battle, and even if his legs are getting chopped, he has the insanity and the constant like mechanics of his power to constantly threaten Aldo in a way that pretty much no other opponent has had.
Yeah.
Except maybe, and like, it's like I say, I kind of think of it like the Mark Hominick fight, except that he has way more natural tools and insanity than Hominick, but he has that same, like, Hominick was also very willing to just like constantly stay there and constantly work and constantly try to create offense, and he didn't beat Jose Aldo, but it was an ugly fucking fight.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was not Jose Aldo's best performance.
No.
And if you put, if you outsize all those skills for a fighter like that, if you push them forward, if you take them all up a notch from Hominick, how ugly does that fight get for Aldo?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to pick Aldo just because, man, I kept saying that Conor McGregor's takedown defense was not the problem that people thought it was. And it clearly is a problem.
It was a horrible problem against Mendes. It really was not there.
It really was not there at all. It was not even close to there. And Mendes, like, I talked about this before that fight. I remember talking about this, and I've talked about it a lot, that Team Alpha Male, their philosophy of groundwork is, I take you down, I look for the instant offense, I let you up, I reset, I take you down, I look for the instant offense, I let you up, I reset. They are not top control players.
Yeah, and that's
They
not
do
the
not.
Nova União mentality of grappling.
No, it's not the alpha male.
But I'm saying it's not the Nova União mentality. Like, I don't think if
Oh
Jose
yeah,
Aldo gets McGregor down, he's going to
and then
spring
let
on a
him up.
guillotine and then let him up.
Yeah, that's not how Novo now works, but that is how alpha male works, and that's
Yeah.
why we saw in that fight Mendez would he'd take him down, he'd get him down, he'd work for something, and then he'd just kind of back off and let McGregor get back up.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all, it was like, oh, well, what the fuck are you doing? You're just letting him get back to his feet. But that's how he trains. Like, that's how they fight. That is their philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And Aldo is crafty enough. It's not like he's just not going to take advantage of the opportunities that are there. He will take advantage of whatever opportunities he's given. And McGregor won't. McGregor will fight the way he fights. He will fight the way he wants to fight. He will do his game. He will punch, he will kick, he will be exciting, he will pressure, and he could certainly he could force Aldo to become too aggressive too often and actually start to fight sloppy and with a disregard for defense, and I think he could knock Jose Aldo out. If Jose Aldo dips into that well of aggression that he holds to outwork fighters when he has to and actually has to stay there, that's the kind of place where a lot of fighters, like, where technique can break down. Mm-hmm. When you are dipping into into something that you don't do all the time. And I could absolutely see it happen, but I'm gonna pick Jose Aldo, and I'm not gonna be comfortable with it, and I'm gonna be nervous all the way through that fucking fight.
Yeah, I mean, in a fight like this, you pick the underdog or you pick the champion, and either way, like, it's Mayweather Pacquiao all over again. It's just like crazy tenseness. Like, it's a fight that everyone's been waiting for. Yeah. How can you feel? It's the best part and the worst part of being such an avid fight fan, because you can almost can't even enjoy the buildup because it's like a personal issue of who will win and what will happen. There's just so much excitement about finding the conclusion.
It's Robbie Lawler, Rory McDonald is exactly, and I expect it to be that fight.
Yeah, I think it'll be. It feels bigger to me than that, though. It does.
Yeah, but it's the same. I mean, but going into that, we had no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I picked Robbie Lawler because I like Robbie Lawler and I wanted to see him win, and I didn't have a complete and utter faith in Rory McDonald staying in there with him. But paper-wise, like, there's a really good argument for Rory McDonald to have that fight. And watching it, there was a good argument for Rory McDonald having that fight.
Mm-hmm.
And this could be very much the same kind of thing. I mean, it feels like the same kind of thing where I'm looking at it, I'm just like, I can see why you would have a blind faith in Conor McGregor, just because you think that that Jose Aldo can't stay in there with Conor McGregor.
Well, Conor McGregor's like Mike Tyson. Like, you just watch him and you're like, who can possibly not experience the same fate that all of his opponents have experienced?
Yeah. So, odds on this fight, Jose Aldo is the very slight underdog, plus 106 down to minus 120. Conor McGregor, minus 110 down to minus 130. So,
I think that means that, perhaps quite foolishly, I have picked underdogs in all but one. No, okay, all three of the three final fights. Maya is actually the favorite.
It should be noted that Aldo wins inside the distance is plus 205, and McGregor wins inside the distance is plus 125.
It's not a bad bet for McGregor, more so than Aldo, I think. Although I wouldn't be surprised to see like an Aldo submission late in this fight.
I wouldn't be surprised if either guy knocks the other one out. McGregor loves to eat punches.
Well, shit, Aldo wins by decision is plus 420.
Yeah. So there are prop bets to be made here that I might say, if you feel like you have faith in an outcome in this fight, you might look at a prop bet.
Why not?
Because it's, I don't know, it's a weird fucking fight, and it's going to be close as hell. And I don't think there's a lot of, there's no good reason to have a lot of faith in any outcome. I would not
No.
be surprised by anything other than McGregor winning by submission. That is the only thing that would surprise me.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Or a double knockout.
He will come in hand down.
Oop, you're cutting out right now. Hold on. Oh, Zane?
Cutting out.
Oh, you're there.
Am I here? Okay. On that note, I'm cutting out, so let's just wrap this show. You can find me on Twitter at DZaneSimon. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. That's BUSCH. You can find us both on Bloody Elbow. Please give this video a like. That's a thumbs up right below it. That helps us out a lot. Subscribe to MMANation.com for all our other videos and interviews and whatnot. We will be doing, I have no idea what all video. We're going to be doing 6 rounds. We will have, obviously, all our other shows next week. I don't even know what shows are next week. This is so overrun with this, but we'll have Knuckle Up, and
Dos Anjos
if I did
Cerrone
it,
is next week.
oh shit,
Right?
I did not even. Yeah, so we will have Care No Care, Knuckle Up, Prospectus, if I did it, Vivisection, all that. Stick around. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will probably see you online for the fight tonight.